Okay, so what are you saying, people, and welcome back to your favorite YouTube channel. So today, guys, like always, another weekly analysis for you. On the screen are the pairs that we'll be analyzing today, but make sure you do stay to the end of the video as there is a bonus pair there for you. I will go through my trades for the week quickly, and then we'll take a look at the dollar as well, and then progress into the analysis for next week. If there is a particular pair you do want to skip ahead to, you can use the timestamps below. But I did end up closing a position this week. I closed dollar CAD. It was very sideways. Price wasn't really seeing the momentum that I wanted to, especially through support levels. If we look at the 4-hour chart, you can see we have a really critical level of support here at 1.43. And price was doing a really good job at bouncing on that level. And I didn't want to see that. I shorted up here a few weeks back, expecting price to break the level. We had one attempt that failed, a second attempt that failed as well. So I'm not really interested in trying to hold the trade through potentially a breakout where I can clearly see price is moving sideways and stuck between resistance and support. So the more this carries on, the more it is just a lottery, to be honest, in terms of which way we break out. Still do have that bearish bias with dollar CAD. However, we very much could now spring back into resistance where it would allow me to look for some re-entries, potentially a better risk to reward as well. Might get a better entry on the next attempt with maybe a tighter stop loss, and then of course potentially look for a test of that same area, and then maybe if I'm lucky a push back to the lows there, which was my original target for the trade. So dollar CAD, I'm still bearish, but because it is sideways, respecting support really well, I did close the trade a little bit early around here for a small profit. We'll see what happens. Like I said, if it does come back to highs, I'll look for some re-entries. We'll get into a bit more detail when we actually get to dollar CAD later in the analysis, but did close that position for a small profit. Euro yen did hopped into this one on, I think it was Thursday or Wednesday. A really nice rejection of this area of confluence. Came into a really nice area in the weekly chart, resistance over there, kind of like that head and shoulder resistance. We got the left head and possible right shoulder, and of course that's the neckline, which I'm expecting price to eventually break to the downside and continue. At the moment, we did wick to the upside quite nicely in the weekly chart. We've got the trend line there at confluence, tapped into that level at 164. I'm looking to see if we can put another lower high in and continue back into support, where my target is for the trade. Hopped into the 4-hour time frame, nice rejection. Could have got maybe a better entry. The stop loss was a bit bigger than I would have liked, but the risk reward still good. 2.19 back into the low. I'll happily take that position. So we're going to see how this continues. I'm going to keep an eye on the JPY basket as well, because I want to see upside momentum with the yen basket as well. If I'm not quite seeing that, I may pull the trade early, depending how it's looking. But I'm still pretty bearish on the yen pairs as a whole, and of course pretty bearish in euro yen since I am shorting that pair at the moment. And then Aussie CHF, a pair which I've been in for a while now. I've taken most of my profit at the low here. I've got about 20% running, so I'm just going to see how this one gets on. My stop loss is trailed around here, 0.56636. I'm looking to see if I can trail the stop loss a little bit further above the high here, but I need price to at least reach support first before I do that. We did come back and test the really key level this week. As you can see, major support there on the weekly chart. Came back to retest it. Very nice rejection. I'm expecting price to eventually take out the wick low, so I'm just going to hold that position all the way down to that low, hopefully. Of course, if not, I'll be trailed out at some stage, but the plan is to see if we can swing it back to the lows. This one's just running in the background. I'll let Aussie CHF do its thing, but I'm still pretty bearish on this one. I'm expecting more downside, and hopefully might find some re-entry opportunities as well. I did miss the retest of that level there. But yeah, going on to the dollar, and then we'll take a look at the pairs we're going to analyze in the video here. So the dollar is at an area of support. 103.5 seems to be holding USD pretty well. If you look to the left, a minor area of support, nice reaction. Looks like that area has proven to be quite sturdy, because the market's kind of rounding off like a nice bottom here. And I do expect us to see a bit of a lift off there. So with the dollar, it looks like we're going to see a bit of retracement. In fairness, it's been very bearish the past few days. So upside was always at some stage going to happen, whether now or further down. The market doesn't move in straight lines, and looks like we're getting that pullback now. So 104.5, keeping a close eye on. Also, this level here at 105.6. Another key level of support, which potentially could give us the continuation. look for opportunities in these areas, selling opportunities to see if we can get a nice continuation back into the swing low. We could go a lot further as well, but I'll look to see if we can just get it back to 103.2, and then we can discuss further opportunities. But yeah, there might be some short-term buys, I suppose, if you're looking for the intraday time frames, if dollar does have some pullbacks, but it is quite messy here. What the biggest takeaway is that price is forming a bit of a bottom here, struggling to break the lows. In terms of finding some intricate buy opportunities, might be a little bit messy there. But yeah, I'm very bearish still with the dollar, and going to keep a close eye on those two levels. In terms of Euro USD, I'm looking for pretty much the opposite. Of course, Euro is looking pretty bearish right now, coming into pretty much the exact same area, but for Euro USD, back into a strong area of resistance or supply area. Really strong push to the downside, tapped into that level again. Really struggled to break through. Nice kind of clear double top there. First attempt, second attempt, and price a nice sell. Potentially might push back in again, so there could be some more selling opportunities. Keep an eye on that if you are looking, excuse me, that was a bad voice break. If you are looking for some shorts there for Euro, I'm more interested in the long, so I'm interested in this area here, which is 1.077, and I like this low here as well. It kind of lines up with that low there too, but around 1.06 as well, got some nice confluence. That's if Euro USD is going to have a deeper pullback. It depends. There's a lot of momentum in the market. It might be pretty shallow before we continue. Maybe we have a bit of a deeper one, so keep an eye on that as well. But still very bullish. The analysis is pretty much the same as last week. Looking for a bit of retracement. Looks like we're seeing that now. So now just getting ready for some long opportunities and just keeping an eye to see how price maneuvers and how it does set up. If things look good, there'll be some entries. If not, then I'll wait for the second level down there. But that's the plan next week for Euro USD. Okay, so next up we've got dollar yen. So dollar yen, I am waiting for some pullback for this one. I did discuss this last week. However, we haven't really seen the pullback I'm looking for. We've taken out some major lows on the left here. We still do have major resistance just above us at 151/152. My long-term bias is still for a big swing back into 140 down here. But because the market is still pretty fatigued, pretty corrective, if we drop to the 4-hour chart, you can see we kind of got a bit of a bowl shape going on here, which is again more of a characteristic that does signify more upside, or at least a bit of a pullback. And I want price to come back into strong resistance so I can short it, of course. So for dollar yen, looking at this one on the daily chart, 4-hour chart, even looking at the weekly as well, still getting wicks to the downside, still not really seeing much momentum. I do want to see a bit of a pullback before selling. Now, price could potentially just keep falling, but yeah, I need that bigger pullback. The opportunity is not looking high quality anymore. Something like this could give us a bit of a relief in price, and then potentially we might sell off. So still looking for some shorts around the 151, 152 area. I did talk about some longs at the start of last week. Didn't really quite see price come back and test support before pushing to the upside. But if we can come back, retest resistance here, like I said, around 151, 152. Some sales at least back into the prior low makes a lot of sense. I do think we can go a lot further, but at least for next week, we'll be expecting a push back to 147, and potentially could leave some positions to run. But that's my kind of expectation going to next week for dollar yen. Okay, so over to dollar CAD. So dollar CAD, I am still pretty bearish with this one as a whole. Price has had a really big move to the upside, and I do still think a big pullback is definitely due for the market, especially if I go to the weekly chart. You can see where we're trading, massive resistance. Previous times we were here, we did see a lot of downside from these levels. So I do think we can at least see a reaction. There's a big level just below us, which price may come back and retest. And that's kind of my expectation for another swing for dollar CAD. However, looking at the lower time frames, the daily chart is kind of just stuck between support and resistance here. We can see a lot of wicks around 1.43. Price is still respecting that area pretty well. Equally, it's still respecting 1.45 pretty well as well, which is kind of why price is just moving sideways for a while. I do expect us to eventually break to the downside, but in terms of shorting the market, there's kind of two ways I'm looking at taking short entries. Either price does push back into the high, there we can look for some entries around 1.45 for perhaps another swing of the range. this would be a nice trade just to take advantage of the range, take advantage of the conditions of the market, and then potentially you can leave positions to run if you are expecting a breakout, or wait for the breakout to happen and look for a retest for a continuation. We did now have a breakout previously, but it did turn out to be a bit of a fake out. Price dropped pretty heavily, consolidated, and broke to the upside of our March rejection. Hopefully the next break to the downside, we could actually see some really nice rejection, and that could be a nice signal to get short and hopefully take advantage of a big swing to the downside. So those are the two opportunities I'm looking at for dollar CAD. It just depends how price kind of sets up really. If we can get a push to the high, great. We'll talk about some shorts at 1.45. If we do suddenly break to the downside, then we do have 1.43 to contend with. But my expectation is still a pretty bearish swing. I do kind of expect to see some dollar strength coming to the market for some retracement. So I've got a feeling we'll probably get a push back to 1.45. So we'll see what we can get there. But if we don't and price does break to the downside, maybe CAD's very strong, we might look at some pullbacks around 1.43 and expecting some shorts back into 1.4 for dollar CAD. Okay, so over to Euro Pounds. I'm pretty bullish on this one. I do think more upside is likely. I'm looking for a push back into 0.85, which is a pretty big level of resistance on the daily chart. If you go to the monthly chart quickly, you can see where we're trading, massive support. And now we spent a few months in this area, so it looks like price is starting to find support and potentially could be getting ready for a move to the upside. I'm not looking for anything crazy, just a push back to 0.85 looks like a realistic expectation. Looking at the weekly chart, we can see really aggressive reactions at support, a nice kind of double bottom formation. Tested it once, big push to the upside, second test, strong push to the upside. So I do think eventually we are going to see price push higher. But first, I do want to see a bit of a correction because, of course, we've already had a really big move to the upside already. Market's a little bit stretched, so it does look like we're correcting. And also, we've pulled into some areas of resistance anyway, so not the best time to be looking to go long Euro Pound in that location. But if we can pull to the downside, which so far we're doing, I do like these two areas here. Oh, didn't mean to do that. So the first area here around 0.836 and this level here just before we had that big sell to the downside broke to the upside really aggressively. If we have a much deeper correction, that could be something, that could be a level where price does potentially gravitate towards and we can find some entries in that area. But for now, it looks pretty corrective to me. It looks like we're getting a bit of a bull flag pattern, really nice impulse, followed by a pretty nice correction. So looking for us to come back, respect this area, and potentially find some entries to go long. If not, then 0.83 looks really good as well. And like I said, targets around the 0.85 area. So really bullish here with Euro Pound. I do expect to see a really big move because of where we're trading from, monthly level support. But Euro Pound is a choppy pair, so I don't like staying in positions too long or looking for any really big moves on Euro Pound because we do correct a lot. We may eventually get there, but it might take a long period of time, and you'll see a lot of back and forth movement. So it might not always be worthwhile. But I do like the opportunity here for Euro Pound, so keep an eye on both those levels and see if we can get at least back to the high for next week. Okay, so over to Aussie dollar. So this one's still looking pretty choppy. I was hoping we could see a break to the upside this week, but unfortunately didn't quite see that happen. Looks like price is still kind of stuck within the consolidation here. I've looked to the left, there are some levels of resistance which price seems to be rejecting pretty well, and some areas here on the left which we're kind of just dancing around, not really respecting too well. Of course, we've had a level of support here for a while which price has bounced from, but altogether looks like resistance is holding pretty well. We might be seeing a bit of a push to the downside back into support, which could actually provide me some nice opportunities because I'm looking for price to get back into support down here at these lows, potentially another stab, and that could be a nice trade to catch the reaction off that low. I'm still kind of expecting USD weakness as a whole, but at the moment, judging where the dollar is, I do think we can see a bit of retracement, maybe some upside for potentially a couple of days, or it could be a couple of weeks, depending on how far and how long the market does pull back from. So a push back to 0.615, 0.61 is kind of what I'm favoring now for Aussie dollar. Then hopefully some longs once we get there. There might be some shorts for Aussie dollar, but perhaps we have another bit of a pullback into resistance. There could be a nice short. Overall, the market is very choppy, so you want to be getting your positions up high. You don't want to be selling now, especially coming back into support. probably not going to get a good trade there. If price can push back into resistance, then you can probably base a nice trade, stop loss above a high, and possibly capitalize on a swing, at least back into the lows here at 0.622. But I do think we can come back into the daily, weekly support down at the lows at 0.615, and then perhaps talk about some longs. That'll probably be an idea for next week, but for now, I do favor some more downside for Aussie dollar, just basically continuing the range through respect to the high very aggressively. Okay, so next up we've got NZD CAD. So I am still pretty bearish on this one, still looking for a push back into support down here on the daily chart, 0.795. We've had a really corrective up move, and after we have broken through structure on our left, I am still looking for a lower high to print. So we've had this pretty impressive swing to the downside, breaking through lows, and now I'm looking for a lower high. If I draw the fib from the high of the move to the low, you can see we just about crept into the 50, and we left a really nice rejection down the daily chart. Nice bearish engulfing candle. Weekly chart, really nice wick to the upside as well. So we're starting to see some rejection at the high here, and I do expect us to eventually roll back over and go and test support. So as we do drop back to the daily chart, there is resistance here on our left, which if price can get back underneath, I do think that could be a really nice area to base a trade from, because the shorts up at the high, they've gone, they've been and gone. Unless price was to come back up for a double top, which could be a nice entry, which is definitely a possibility. But if the market continues to sell off, then the best opportunity you would probably have is a pullback and a retest of the high here at 0.82192. Find some entries, hopefully a retest, shorts above the high, and then hopefully capitalize on the swing back into the low. So I'm looking for a pretty big move there for New Zealand CAD back into 0.8, 0.795. It looks like the top to this pullback has formed. At least I'm anticipating to be the top. So it's either we pull back into the top to respect it, we can get stop loss above the high and really take advantage of a really big risk reward, or price cracks back below that high there, retest it, and then we continue. But either which way, looking for some shorts here for New Zealand CAD. Let me just put the entry stop loss in there roughly. Again, this is a rough guide of how I look to take the position, but it depends on the candlesticks and how we get there. But that is what I'll be looking for next week for New Zealand CAD. Okay, so next up we've got pound NZD. So I'm pretty bullish on this one as a whole. The trend is still to the upside. I do think eventually, I do think we're at some prices where we could actually have a pretty big reversal at some point here for pound NZD. But until I see signs of that happening, I'm not going to really go into detail of that, because the market's still very consistent with the higher highs and higher lows. So that is kind of what I'm focused on at the moment. We've got a major swing high here, which looks like price is sort of respecting, not really well. We kind of broke below, broke back above, so it's not really being respected that well. I was talking a lot about this area here last week, as I was hoping price would get here for a retest and hopefully find some entries for a long. I still like this area, but like I said, it looks like price is starting to respect 2.24, and possibly might see a continuation back into the high. So next week for pound NZD, I'm looking at two setups. Either price makes a move back into support here, respects it, and then we continue back to the high, or we break through, comes back into the area I was looking for originally last week, and then hopefully we see the swing to the upside. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a swing all the way back to the high, even a swing back into resistance. If we pull back from here, that could be a good point to target. It depends on the risk reward you're after and how long you're looking to hold your trades for. That will vary between trade to trader and how aggressive you want to be with your targets. But if the trend is going to continue, I would expect at least a swing back to the high there and possibly some new highs there for pound NZD. We're pretty bullish across multiple time frames, still a lot of momentum in the market, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do get back there. But in terms of entries, we do have some have a couple of distinct levels here which could provide some opportunities. Let's see if price can get there, respect it, possibly another higher low will form. If not, then we'll look for the retest of this area around 2.22 for some longs, and again targets back to the high there for pound NZD. Okay, so next up we've got CAD Yen. So CAD Yen still in an area which I kind of want to see a bit more of a pullback. I'm still pretty bearish across the board for the yen pairs. But we have taken out some major lows here, as we can see that wick low and price is still looking pretty fatigued, still lacking a lot of momentum as well. I've talked about pullback into this area here for another short, potentially another lower high forming. If I whip out the Fibonacci from the high to the low, you can see it lines up pretty well with the 0.5, and you can see we're making these distinct lower highs as well. So I do think price can potentially make another one. So I'm still looking for more upside for CAD Yen before I do get short. The market is still looking pretty corrective. We may sell off from here. That could be the reality. Looks like we are testing some levels here in the 4-hour chart, but because I do want to have that healthier pullback, I would wait for price to have that bigger correction before shorting back into 106, and perhaps from there we can find some nicer entries to take price down, and hopefully a swing back into the low. I do think we'll go further than that, but even a swing back to the low, you're looking at pretty good risk to reward there. No need to try and shoot for the moon every single trade. Some trades just keep it relatively simple. Back to a swing low or a swing high is always a reasonable target to have for a trade, of course depending on the context. But in this case, if you can see another lower high, there's a good chance price does come back to test support again. So that is still my expectation there for CAD Yen. Overall, market is seeing a possible reversal here, so I do think eventually a price like 96 could be hit, but for now expecting a bit of a pullback. There may be some short-term buy opportunities you can look at, but for me I'm focused with this with the shorts for 106, and expectations a short back into 101 for next week. Okay, so next we've got pound USD. So I am still pretty bullish on pound. However, we've already had a really big move to the upside. It does look like the market's a bit stretched. I'm likely to have a bit of a pullback. So I'm looking at a couple areas for some buys. I like the retest of the high here on the daily chart, and also like this brief consolidation that we had on the daily as well. We paused there for a few days, really strong move to the upside, and we haven't come back for a retest. Long term, potentially we could be seeing a push back to the swing high. I think just keeping it relatively simple, if we can get a pullback into one of these two areas, a swing back to where we came from, back into the high, looks like a pretty reasonable target to have, and depending on your entry, could be a really big trade as well. It does look like price is breaking out this corrective channel now, so perhaps next week we do still see a bit more downside there for pound USD. There may be some shorts in the lower time frames to look at on the way down if you want to take advantage of the counter trend move. I'm more focused on the longs here for pound, so just waiting for price to come to me. 1.28, 1.27 look like really nice levels to buy from. Of course, spotting these areas is half the battle. The second half is seeing how price gets there and how you react, whether it is actually a good trade or not. But if confirmations are met and criteria is met, I will be looking for entries in these areas and see if I can target back to resistance, which is at 1.3 roughly. Big cycle level there for pound USD. That would make for a really nice target for the trade, and there's always that option to leave position to continue if USD is going to be long-term bearish as well. So for now, pretty bullish here for pound, just waiting for price to come to me down to 1.28, 1.27, and see if we can long it back into the swing highs. Okay, so over to pound CAD. So pound CAD, I'm looking for some retracement. The market has been very, very bullish over the past few weeks, and you can see we've taken a major high on the left here. So I do expect us to see some retracement, and you can see in the weekly time frame as well, we had one big bullish candle a couple of weeks ago. Last week's candle was last week's candle was a big wick to the upside, closed slightly bullish, and this week's candle closed slightly bearish, but altogether we are firing wicks to the upside, and that initial momentum we had on the breakout has disappeared. So if we can put a top here, I do think a pullback is likely, and as you can see, there's a pretty big level of resistance just below us, which will be turned support, and I do think there's a good chance pound CAD does come back for a retest of that area. And I did say when we first had the initial breakout, that would be a nice place for a break and retest. It never quite happened, but should price eventually get there, I do think it will be a nice place for a buy if the trend is going to continue. In terms of the sells, because we are starting to put in a high there, as we can see in the weekly chart, I would only be looking for sells if we can get back to the high for potentially a big double top, and that could potentially give us nice opportunities to take pound CAD down. At the moment, it still looks pretty corrective on the way down, so it tells me that potentially we could still see another run higher, which could leave another wick for next week's candle. next week's weekly candle, and we could see some sells shortly afterwards. So looking to try and anticipate that rejection. Of course, if you do see confirmations on the time frames you're looking to enter, 4 hour below, that would justify the trade, but you're anticipating the weekly chart still respecting this area around 1.875. And again, looking for that sell. Doesn't have to be all the way back down to the weekly or daily level of resistance. Turn support there at 1.81. Let's say if we push to the upside from this area, that would of course be a level of a good level of support to target. So pound CAD, I'm still in retracement mode, expecting price to come back down. Like I said, I like the longs down here, but we're probably still at least a week away from us getting there, even longer potentially. So not too focused about this level, but definitely keep it in the back of our minds for now. But yeah, expect some downside next week for pound CAD from 1.87 and eventually 1.815. I'm expecting to be hit. Okay, so over to pound yen. So I'm still pretty bearish with this one as a whole. I'm still looking for a push back into the wick low at 180-ish. However, price is still pretty corrective. We could be putting in another lower high for a swing down. I'm not too sure. Price looks like it's respecting some support here on the daily time frame and finding it difficult to break through. If we were to do that early next week, and of course momentum looks good, perhaps we do just continue to the downside from there on, and this high here is our next major high. But I did point out last week that we potentially could go a little bit deeper. I'm looking around 186. Nice area of supply up there, as long with that trend line there, potentially get the third test of that area. 196, 197 was kind of my area I was expecting price to get to this week to potentially short, but we haven't quite got there yet. Perhaps we are putting a lower high in. The market's not necessarily perfect. My analysis is not perfect. Sometimes you might miss a level, put a high in, and then fall. That could be the situation here, but it does look like resistance is holding a support pretty well here, and that could act as a catalyst to send price to the upside perhaps one more time before we do get that big sell. So I do like the shorts around 196. That's where my confidence is. That's kind of where I'm waiting for price to get to for pound yen before the short. You can see support on the daily time frame here is held pretty well, and now looks like we're having a bit of a move to the upside. So pound yen, I'm just kind of looking at this overall structure here: push, pullback, push. Now I'm anticipating another pullback for perhaps another push to the downside and another swing high. So that's all I'm looking to try and catch here with pound yen, and we've got a really nice area of confidence for that to happen in. So next week it's a judgment whether price is going to hold into this level or not. So far it's just about holding as support. If I refine it to the 4 hour level, if we do crack through and perhaps start to reject as resistance, then that will be our sign that says, okay, perhaps the lower high is in, and we can see some downside. So some shorts on the retest of that level could look really good next week with a swing back into support, back to where we came from, around the 188, 87 area. That would look like a nice target and a nice swing opportunity there as well. If of course we have a deeper pullback, then I will be looking at that 196 area, because that's where I do think a major lower high can form, which potentially I'll be able to hold on for quite some time if the swing really does play out, at least back into the lows. But I do think eventually some lows there as well. So that's really how I'm looking to play pound yen. Either we break below current support and continue falling, or we push one more time to the upside back into 196, study price action in that area. If we get the confirmations we're looking for, take some shorts and swing it back into 187.6 with some longer term targets at 180. Okay, so on to gold. So gold overall, very, very bullish market. We've had a bit of a down move towards the end of the week, and looks like we tapped into a nice brief area of consolidation, which perhaps could give us another continuation back to the highs. If that is the case, I'd probably wait for some structure to break on the lower time frames. I think this is a bit more of an intra-week, intraday opportunity to look for if we can break back above this zone here, because we did have a really big sell with that bearish candle there on the hourly chart. If we can break back above, that kind of gives us a bit of a V-shaped pattern here. Impulse down, impulse back up, looking for the retest / correction of that move, and that could take you back to the highs there at 3,056 and potentially higher with some new all-time highs. So that's kind of a bit more of an intraday opportunity to look at. For me myself, I'm still looking for a larger pullback. I'm looking at those swings on the 4 hour chart to trade for gold. And these are the areas I'm kind of looking at, as I mentioned last week. If I do draw the fib from the low here to the high, you see it lines up pretty well with the 0.5 and the 0.618 with these zones. Perhaps we can tap into this area, maybe tap into the 50 as well. If we come a little bit deeper, I've got this lovely consolidation which we broke out. Again, never had the retest, which we could probably see a retest of the 0.618 simultaneously as well. So that's kind of the setups I'm looking at for gold. Again, looking for the bigger swing because I'm looking at the 4-hour chart. I'm not really so concerned about the intraday moves, but to be fair, it's probably better to focus on the intraday moves here with gold, especially with the current conditions, because we could just keep pushing with all this momentum and you might not see that bigger pullback, which is why I look at a lot of pairs. But for gold, if we keep this up, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we're back at the highs there early next week. So intraday level, keep an eye to see if we can creep back above that resistance, and that could be a nice opportunity for a retest for a long. If you are looking for a bigger swing for gold, there are some nice opportunities, some nice levels to look at. 29.55 and also 29.32 to keep an eye out. But still very bullish for gold, and expecting eventually a pullback and price to go and create some new highs next week. Okay, so over to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, I'm still pretty bearish on. I am still looking for more downside. I am keeping a close eye on this area here on the weekly daily chart around 72k. Of course, this is the level we broke through where we had all that momentum. Since then, the market consolidated and we have it broken to the downside. So that weekly candle a couple of weeks ago really set the tone for me. And now I'm expecting price to eventually roll back over and test support. It would be nice if we can creep back up and test the breakout, the level that we had the breakout with again for re-entries, because we did have a couple tests there. So in theory, could already be short on Bitcoin from around those prices, 1992k. But if you are looking for some entries, I think that's still the best place for some entries. At the moment, on the lower time frames, I'm not really liking the current price action. Is very, very sideways. We're not really trading at any significant area of value now for Bitcoin, unless we were to make a push back into that 92k, 90k region. So I would avoid shorting these areas, but again, we may not get there. So keep that in mind. But I like the longs here as well. You see price having these spikes to the downside. If you could see another one into that level of support, there's a good chance of a reaction, perhaps a push back into the 90k region. I'm not too sure about all-time highs again for Bitcoin from this area. It could happen. I feel like Bitcoin might have a bigger retracement than that overall. But in terms of a solid level of support, to at least anticipate a bit of a bounce there for Bitcoin, I think this is a nice level. Of course, we must see how price gets there and how we react. But this does look like a good level so far. So yeah, overall Bitcoin kind of trading in no man's land really for me, especially looking with a high time frame perspective. We've got a solid resistance above us, solid support below us. And right now we're just in between that. So I need price to drift to one of these two areas. And then we can look at how price gets there, how we react, and hopefully base some trades from that. But at the moment, I do still see another drop there for Bitcoin. Okay, so last but not least, we've got our bonus pair, which for this week is silver. So I'm pretty bullish on silver, expecting a push back to the high here at 34.8. Pretty much 35, just below that big psychological level. We've got a solid level of resistance, which price has recently cracked through. And basically, since we've breached this resistance, it's made me very bullish on the pair and expecting a swing back to the high. Now I'm just looking for the retest, the high low, and hopefully I can find some entries to swing it back into the high. The way I see it, the market has been pretty consistent with these higher lows, and all I'm looking to do is try and find the next one, preferably on the retest of the level. So now, instead of acting as resistance once, twice, a third time, briefly a fourth time, hopefully we can act as support, of course, waiting for confirmations in that area, and that could there take us to the upside and probably a lot further as well. I do think silver's still got a long way to go to hit its targets. 35 is like an intermediate target. I do expect to see a lot higher prices, but that's more of a long-term view. At least for next week anyway, a swing back to where we came from, back into the high here, I think is pretty reasonable over the next few days, maybe a couple of weeks, depends how long it takes for us to get moving. There's a nice brief pause in the market as well, excuse me, where price did pause a little bit there before had a nice move to the upside, so a lot of momentum came from that area. And if we can see price start to reject, give us a nice shift of momentum, We're looking for some entries for at least a push back into 34.15. Like I said, I do expect us to go and hit the daily weekly swing high at 34.868. So that is very much my analysis going into silver. Very bullish on this pair, bullish on gold. Gold's been very bullish. Silver has shown some signs, but not really. So I think silver's still got some catching up to do. So there is value there in silver. And now we're pulling back into some really nice areas where I do expect to see a bit of a reaction. So keeping a close eye on silver. Really nice long opportunities coming up. Of course, it's important to see how we react, not just buy because we're there. Need to see how price is reacting before getting involved. But that is the plan I will have for silver next week. So guys, if you have enjoyed the analysis, please be sure to drop a like before you leave. It does really help out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well and hit the bell as well so you don't miss out on any streams or uploads in the future. Make sure you do check out the Elevating Traders Discord channel. The link to that is in the description below. You can find updates there regarding Elevating Traders. Of course, you can speak to other traders, join discussions with myself, other traders, share ideas. I share ideas there too. So if you're interested, make sure you do check out the Discord link in the description below. Completely free to join. But guys, I do really hope that you enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend. Of course, I'll be back live again next week. So I hope to see you there.